Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. In this video, we'll be talking about event capturing, event bubbling, and event delegation. Now let us first understand about event capturing and event bubbling. Events in JavaScript basically use the concept of capturing and bubbling, where they trigger your event listeners. So let me go to the whiteboard to explain this clearly. So let us select the pen first, and let us say we have a button element. So let us say we have a button element that is enclosed in another outer div. So we have a button element enclosed in a div, and that is enclosed in another outer div. So this is your outer div, and then finally enclosed in the body tag. So you can say this as your body tag. Now once you click on the button that is present on the interface, the browser will then run through different phases. One is the capturing phase. So when you click on the button, browser will initiate some different phases that occur. That is, one is capturing phase. Now capturing phase goes from outside to inside. It is important to understand that when you click on the button, the click event doesn't get listened to by the listener on the button, but also by the event listeners on the divs that are enclosing the button. So what will happen is when you click on the button, the event will start emitting from the point of trigger, which is a button, and will keep on emitting or keep on bubbling up. So this will happen in the bubbling phase. So if the press event or the click event happens on the button, then that will get emitted and will basically reach to the div that is enclosing the button element. Then it will emit and go up, will reach the outer div that is enclosing this div and the button, and then will eventually reach the body element. So what will happen is that the browser will check whether you have a capturing event listeners on the outer divs, which would then invoke its functions before any event listeners registered on the button. Now this bubbling phase on the other hand goes from inside to outside. So capturing phase goes from outside to inside, O to I, and bubbling phase will go from inside to outside, which is the case when we click on a button and the event gets bubbled up to the elements that are surrounding the button. Now all the event listeners that you basically add with the add event listener method are by default registered in the bubbling phase. This means if you have event listeners on the button and the outer div, then the button event listener will run first. So first the event listener will run for the button, then this event will bubble up, and then the event listener for the outer div will get triggered if it is listening to the same event, the click event. So this was all about event capturing and bubbling phases. Let us move forward to understand this via some code. So let me show you the markup that I've already created in my index.html file. So I've created some markup where we have the grandparent wrapper div that is enclosing the parent wrapper div, and then that is enclosing a wrapper div, which in turn encloses a button that has a class of special. And then we have an order list, which we'll see later, that has some list of items like vegetables or fruits, and are given classes of color names, IDs of color names. So what we will do is we will first select a special button, which is this one. So we'll reach out and grab a reference for the button that has a class of special. So what I will do is I will register an event listener on the button with the special class for the click event. So let us go back to our JavaScript file, const special button document dot query selector, and I will use the class of special. Then special button dot add event listener. It is listening for the click event, and when it happens, we'll trigger a callback function. that will receive the event object as the parameter. So I can say event object, and I can say event object dot stop propagation. Now this is used when you want to stop the propagation of the event to basically bubble up from the point of trigger to other elements that are surrounding the button element. But let us comment this out for now. So console log button element got clicked, and I will also log the event to the console. Now let us also select the div that we have in our HTML. So first let us select the element. So I will say const wrapper div document dot query selector and wrapper div. Then let us select the parent of this, which is parent wrapper div document query selector p hyphen wrapper hyphen div and const grand parent div document query selector dot grandparent wrapper div. Okay, so finally we have the references for all our elements. Now let us also register an event listener on the div element as well. So what I will do is I will say dot add event listener will listen for the click event, and once that happens we'll trigger the callback function, will receive the event object, okay, and log to the console the div element. To be precise, we can say wrapper div element got clicked, and I will log the event object to the console and above also. Okay, so now let us finally register our listeners on the parent of this div and the grandparent of the wrapper div. So I will say I'll copy this out and parent wrapper div. So let us change the log. I will say parent wrapper div got clicked, and change this to grandparent div, and I can say grandparent wrapper div element got clicked. Now if we see output in the console, let us go back to the browser, and if I click on the button, you can see first the button element got clicked, then we get the log for wrapper div element getting clicked, then the parent wrapper div element got clicked, and then finally the grandparent wrapper div element got clicked. Let us understand this with the diagram. So first this button element got clicked, and the event started emitting from this point of trigger, reached the listener that was registered on the div element that is surrounding this button element. So that also got triggered, and we got the second log. Then it did emit from this point, reach to the parent wrapper div. Again the callback got triggered and we got the log, and finally it reaches to the grandparent div. Now the body element doesn't have a listener listening for the click event, so that doesn't get triggered because there is no click event happening on the body element, because body element is not listening for the click event. So on seeing the output in the console, you can see that we are first getting that the button was clicked, then we got div element was clicked, then parent div got clicked, and finally grandparent div got clicked. And you can see that the event got triggered from inside to outside. Event got clicked from inside to outside. So it is emanating from the point of trigger, which is a button, and going up and reaching to the higher elements in the DOM. What is happening here is that first the capturing phase runs, but the case here is from inside to outside, so the browser ran the bubbling phase for the button on which the click event got triggered. We can see that first the event listener that got triggered, which is the button element with the class of special, so that is why it ran first. Then we check whether there is a listener on the elements as well that are enclosing this button within it. We can see that the div is enclosing the button, which again has a listener on it because we registered it ourselves for the click event, so that gets triggered second time. Then further the event will keep on bubbling till all such listeners get exhausted, that is till the grandparent div in our case. We also will go to the body element to check whether it has a listener attached to that as well for the click event, but being unable to find one, the bubbling phase will simply end at the grandparent div. So if you want to switch to capturing phase from bubbling phase, we have a third parameter that we can add to the add event listener method. So here we can say true. So setting it to true, we are informing the browser that the event listener is not a part of bubbling but instead the capturing phase. And once you do that, the listener of the grandparent div will run first before the button. And since the capturing phase is the first to run, the code for the grandparent div will get executed first. Let us see that in action by going to the browser. So I click on the button. You can see first the grandparent wrapper div element got clicked, and then the button element got clicked, wrapper div element got clicked, and parent wrapper div element got clicked, because we know that first the capturing phase will run, and we enable that for our grandparent div, so it got triggered first, and then the bubbling phase occurred. Now this entire mechanism of having multiple event listeners for the same event, because you can see that the event doesn't only get triggered on the element on which it occurred, but also on the parent elements that were listening for it. This is known as event propagation. It means that the event will propagate up in case of bubbling phase, that is from inside the element to the outside of it, or in capturing phase from outside to inside. This simply means that event just not only occurs on the element itself, but also on all the parent elements, because you can listen for it on them as well, like we are doing in this case. Now what I want to do is I want to basically trigger the click event on the button only, and I don't want it to propagate up from the point of trigger. So let us understand this. Now let us again consider the same diagram. So we have the button element with us. Then we have a div element that is surrounding it. Then another div element, which is the parent div. And then the grandparent div that is surrounding all the elements that are within it. Okay. Now what we want is that if I basically trigger the click event on the button, I don't want it to propagate up from the point of trigger, which in our case is button. So when you click on the button, so let me select a pen of other shade. If you click on the button here, I don't want it to propagate up. So I don't want the propagation to happen. Okay. I want that the event should be confined within the boundaries of the button element only. So I basically want to stop the propagation. I don't want that the event be listened by the listeners that we have set up on our parent elements that are surrounding the button. So for that I can make use of stop propagation method that I showed you in the start of the video on the event object on the button, and this will not allow the event to bubble up to other elements that are up in its hierarchy. Now any other listeners for the click event, if they are registered on the parent elements of the button, will not get triggered. So let us see this in action. So I'll go to the listener that we have registered on the button element, and here I will uncomment this out and go back to the browser. Let us click on the button again. Okay. So we are getting grandparent div element got clicked, button element got clicked. Okay. So let us first change this because we are using capturing phase for grandparent div element. Let us disable that, and now let us try this. Let us click on the button. You can see only the button element got clicked, and no other event listeners got triggered because we stopped the propagation of our event from happening to other elements that are surrounding the button. So even though the listeners are registered on the elements that are surrounding the button, they will not get triggered. As simple as that. Also, there are some events that don't get propagated at all. For that you can check out the MDN docs. The link for that can be found down below. Now let us finally learn about the concept of event delegation to wrap up with this video. To understand this, I've created a list of elements as you can see in the browser. So back in my HTML code, we are having an ordered list. So we'll grab a reference for the list items. So what I will do here is I will say const food list items document query selector all, and I will grab the node list for all the list items that we are having within the order list. So I'll make use of the for of loop, and then will iterate over the node list that we are having. So I'll say for of, so we can write this, and we can say iterator as for const food of food list items, because we are iterating the DOM object. And then on each food item or the list item that we are having, I will basically attach a listener for the click event, and when the list item gets clicked, the callback function will run. So I will say event.target, whatever list element got clicked, I will basically toggle the class that we will form using event.target.id. So we'll be toggling these colors as classes, like orange, red, brown, green, and you can see here. So we have orange, so we'll toggle the class orange, and we have styles defined for these colors as well. So we have the class for colors orange, red, brown, and we'll set up the background colors for these elements. So once you toggle them, you'll basically get the class on the element. Again, if you click it, the class will get disabled, the color will go away. Okay, so let us see this in action. So I'll go back to my browser and we'll click on the elements, and you can see the color appeared. You again click on it, it will disappear because we are toggling the class of the color that we are creating using the ID that we have set up. Now this approach is not an efficient one to do this because you have unnecessarily registered a lot of event listeners. So as you can see from the code, for each list item that is there in the list of items that we are having, on each list item we are registering an event listener that is listening for the click event. So you have unnecessarily registered a lot of event listeners here, and this is not good from performance as well as memory perspective. Now let us see how we can use the event delegation here to tackle this problem. Here we will not be registering multiple event listeners, rather we will make use of event propagation, which we just learned. So let me comment out the above lines of code and let us make use of event delegation, and let us see it in action. So I will comment this out. So we'll first grab the entire list for this example. So I will say const foods document.query selector, and we'll pass on the order list. So I'm grabbing a reference for our order list, and now just register a single event listener on the list that will basically hold all the list items, because we know that the click event on any list item will bubble up. So let me trace a diagram for you to understand it thoroughly. So here we have a list of elements. So this is your ordered list, and here we are having list items. In the previous case, we registered an event listener for each of the list items that we were having. Now we will do is we will register a single event listener on the list, on this list that is surrounding the list items, because we know that the click event on any list item will bubble up, and hence we can register an event listener on the list in order to listen it on the list instead of that respective list item. So what I can do is I can go back to my editor and I can say foods.add event listener. So the parent element for each of the list items that we are having will listen for the click event, and once that occurs, we'll trigger a callback function. And here what I will do is I will say event.target class list toggle, and I will use the color that we are getting from the ID, and I will toggle that because we are using the color as the CSS class. I'll toggle that and the functionality will still remain the same. So let us see the output in the browser. So now you can see it works fine. And here we are using a single event listener. So it is more memory efficient and performant as well because you're now using a single event listener instead of registering multiple event listeners on all the list items. So this is how we can make use of event delegation in case of an ordered list. So this was all about the video on event propagation and event delegation. Also, if you want to learn more about events, I do have a complete video on special event known as the drag and drop event that is used in one of the features in Trello board. The link for that video can be found down below. So if you like this video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and enable the notifications for all the upcoming uploads. And I will see you guys in the very next video.